share the screen. So we stopped on this item 116 last week, which is section 7 of the Spirit's book, Bicorporeality and Transfiguration. Okay. So last week we read a little bit about these apparitions of spirits of the living. And we stopped in this item 116 after the example that Kardec gave from a case which he could analyze during his studies before writing the Medium's book. Okay, so again, please participate. Don't hesitate to interrupt, to make your questions, your comments, and so on, because in fact, we are all learning together. Okay. Alors, item 116. Kardec is giving a second example of bicorporeality or apparition of the phantasm of living. Another lady who resides out in the country was seriously ill, and one particular night, around 10 o'clock, she saw an older gentleman from her city, whom she had sometimes seen at social functions, but with whom she had no closer relationship. He was sitting in an armchair at the foot of her bed, and now and then would take a pinch of snuff. He seemed to be watching over her. Surprised at having a visitor at such an hour, she wanted to ask him why he was there, but the gentleman made a sign for her not to talk, but rather to go back to sleep. She tried several times to speak to him, but each time he repeated his silent recommendation, and she would fall back to sleep. So imagine yourself, you are sleeping, and then you wake up and you see some person, for having seen him once or twice, in an armchair aside your bed. It's something when you are not used to, I think more than one would be a little bit afraid. No? So let's continue to see the end of the story. A few days later, after she had recovered from her illness, she received a visit from the same gentleman. However, at a convenient hour and actually in person this time. He was dressed in the same manner, with the same snuff box, and displayed the same mannerism. Certain that he had visited her during her illness, she thanked him for the effort he had made. However, he was quite surprised and said that he had not had the pleasure of seeing her for a long time. The lady was familiar with the spirit phenomenon and thus understood what had transpired, but she did not wish to go into explanation and was content with telling him that it had probably just been a dream. Okay. So you see, the person itself did not keep memory of having been assisting this lady during nighttime. He had not the memory. So the lady ended up saying, okay, it was just a dream. And Kardec is continuing. These believers will say that it was in fact a dream. Those know-it-alls who believe themselves to be enlightened individuals. However, it is a fact that this woman had been no more asleep than the other one. Was it a waking dream, or in other words, a hallucination? That is the final catchphrase, the universal explanation for everything that they cannot comprehend, since We have already sufficiently refuted this objection. We shall proceed on behalf of those who are able to understand us. So hallucination, again, is this famous drawer that some persons are pushing and putting inside, closing the drawer, hiding all the phenomena who are somehow contradicting their beliefs or even, how to say, their scientific thinking or paradigm. So you see, it's another fact on top of the first fact that we had read the last time, which had a little bit more proofs of identity. This is another one. So it's really difficult to believe why this moment so, why that man, why that moment, and so on. So it's too easy to just push this phenomenon into the category of hallucination. Okay. Munir?
Good morning, everyone. Hi, Charles. Yes, the impression that we have, and I think this is the impression that Kardec wants to give to us, is that hallucination is like a big black box. Whatever you can't explain, you just throw it in there. But I think, as it's been mentioned before, you can then start to look within what is called hallucination and see that there are several types of what it's called hallucination, and some of them don't make sense if you look at them as hallucination as such, something that you have no explanation for that, because there is a pattern, there are explanations for that, and that I think that's what Kardec is trying to say to us. Yes, we can't say that hallucinations do not exist. No, we can't say that. But you can just say that everything you can't explain is a type of hallucination. It's like, when you are organizing things, office, for instance, and you say, okay, here I'll put some, paper, and here a pen, and here pencils, and those objects, you don't know what to do with them. You put them in the same box, But then after a while, you see that the box is too full, and you can classify what is inside the box in a different way and say, well, they are not just anything. They could be classified as, this type of object or that type of object. And I think it's what Kardec is saying. Materialists don't have explanation, it's hallucination. But spiritists, when they look at hallucination, they say, well, not everything is hallucination because it doesn't make sense. The person comes, visits you during a dream, someone you don't know very well. And then when the person itself comes, it's in the same way, dressed in the same way, using the same snuff box, and so on and so forth. So, there's something more than hallucination in this.
Yes, and the best explanation always is the one who explains all the facts and not only some of them. Yeah. And indeed, the theory of this bicorporeality is explaining all the facts so far, at least. So let's continue 117. Here is a more characteristic case, and we would be curious to see if it can be explained away as being a simple play of the imagination. Okay, let's see it. A certain gentleman who lived out in the country never wanted to marry despite his family's entreaties. They were particularly insistent that he meet a young lady from a neighboring city whom he had never seen. One day, while in his bedroom, he was surprised at the presence of a young lady dressed in white with a wreath of flowers around her head. She told him that she was white and extended her hand to him, which he took in his own and noticed a ring on it. A few moments later, she vanished. Surprised at this apparition and certain that he had been wide awake, he tried to find out if anyone had come during the day. he was told that no one had visited the house. Okay, so this is someone really with the feet on the floor, huh? Apparently. A year later, he yielded to the renewed entreaties of a relative and decided to go see the lady who had been recommended to him. He arrived one day on the day of Corpus Christi. Everybody was returning from the procession, and one of the first people he saw upon entering the house was a young lady whom he recognized as the one who had appeared to him earlier. She was dressed in the same clothing because the day of the apparition had also been on Corpus Christi. He was astonished, and the girl herself cried out in surprise and fainted. When she recovered, she explained that she had already met this gentleman on the same day a year earlier. They were married. That was in 1835. At the time, no one knew about spirits, and furthermore, both were extremely practical and possessed of less heightened imagination than most. So you see here, it's starting having a lot of so-called coincidences that some are differently calling synchronicities, involving those two persons. And the first, when there was the first apparition, the man, he did not absolutely know the person, he did never see her, and was capable for recognizing her when he saw her in the reality the next year. And the same happened with her, who recognized him. So this means that during this big corporeality phenomenon that occurred 1 year later, both could memorize one another. Okay. Kardec continues, one will probably say that both had been preoccupied with the idea of the proposed union, and that this state provoked a hallucination again. However, one must not forget that the future husband had remained so indifferent in the matter that a whole year passed without his going to see his future bride. Even if we accepted the hallucination hypothesis, we would still have to explain the similarities between the double apparitions, the coincidence of the dress, the day of Corpus Christi, and finally, the fact that two individuals who had never met physically recognized each other, circumstances that could not have been produced by the imagination. Okay, so this one is, as Kardec said, quite a strong phenomenon. Huh? And again, it happened in 1835. So 1835 was far before Higgsville, far before people started talking and being interested to Spiritism. Okay, everything okay? So let's continue. 118. Before proceeding any further, we must respond at once to a question that inevitably arises. How can the body remain alive while the spirit is absent? It's a good question, isn't it? We will respond that the body is kept alive by its organic life, which does not depend on the presence of the spirits, like plants, which are alive but have no spirit. So there are some automatic functions of the life, which is making such that even when we sleep every night, or when we do these out-of-body experiences, our body continues perfectly operating. On top of that, having the link, which still remains between the spirit, which may be at the different places, and his body. We should also add, however, that during life, the spirit is never completely detached from the body, indeed. Like certain seeing mediums, spirits recognize the spirits of a living individual by a luminous trail that ends at the body, a phenomenon that never occurs if the body is dead. For then, the separation is complete. It is by this connection that the spirit is warned, wherever it may be at the time, that it must return to the body, which it does at the speed of light. And here I think Kardec is wrong, because it's not the speed of light, it's higher than the light, okay? It was a manner to say speed of light is something very quick, so the spirit comes immediately back to his body. But physically talking, Munir, I think you agree with me, he comes back quicker than the light, quicker than 300,000 kilometers per second.
Yeah, I think that was the fastest thing they knew at the time. So, it's a way of saying, as fast as we can imagine.
Yes, in some other places in the Spiritist teachings, we see at the speed of thought, which is maybe physically more correct, but okay.
Yeah.
The result is that the body can never die during spirit's absence, and that upon returning, the spirit will never find the door shut, as some romanticists have portrayed in their stories meant to entertain people. Okay. So Kardec is here referring to the Spirit's book, questions number 400 and subsequent ones. Okay. So you see, Kardec is here clearly talking about what a lot of people are saying also today. This how do we say that in English? In French, it says le cordon d'argent. So it's silver cord, which is connecting the spirit with his body as long as he is alive. That the seeing mediums can see it for the spirit of the livings, and this silver cord is absent when for the spirits which are not incarnated anymore. Okay.
Yeah, and Charles, and apparently, those who are in the spiritual world, they can tell if someone is still incarnated or not, because they say the appearance is different. And I remember, I think in one of André Luis's book, he got frightened the first time he saw incarnate people in a group because they looked like ghosts. So he got scared of incarnate spirit, whereas he was one, but no longer with the body. And it has to do, I think, with the fluids and everything that, keeps the connection with the body that, remains partially with the spirit.
Yeah, exactly. So probably on top of this silver cord that, of course, the spirit can perceive as well. The spirit is maybe carrying some more dense fluids linked to his state being incarnated. Okay. So let's continue. See, yes.
No
Charles, sorry, it's Christine.
Yes, Christine. Hello, good evening.
Good evening. I just wanted to, and I'm not sure if I've actually mentioned this before, but my auntie and uncle live in a house which is quite well visited by spirits. But next door, their grandson bought a house, and it's in an area of Australia that's quite an old area in the country. And my uncle was looking through the kitchen window and looked towards his grandson's house, and there was people standing there on the front veranda. And so, of course, he went out to, say to them, well, he's not home, he's at work. But he didn't see anybody. And he went back and he stood at the kitchen window again, and these people were still there, but then he noticed how they were dressed. And they were dressed in clothes that were not of our time. And he just accepted that and went on his way. But he always remembers that there were these people. And so now if he sees them, he just accepts that they're there. And this was in the day at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So he's told me lots of stories, but that's one I always remember. So that seems to be where what we've just discussed highlights the fact that the spirits are there, but they always have that, they must have some sort of connection to the body, to a body.
The house.
Yeah, or to the house.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And another effect is probably when the spirits are incarnated, again, on top of this silver cord, they may be a little bit easier perceived by the seeing mediums. So we remember we discussed this in the previous chapter, that not every medium can see every spirit because it must have this compatibility of fluid and so on. But when the spirit is, when how to say, the apparition is from incarnated spirit, adding on what Munir just said from Sheikh Xavier's book, a little bit more dense spiritual fluids around him, including vital fluid, maybe, is maybe making this sight seeing more easy for the person. And your uncle was probably also had this type of faculty to perceive those entities.
Mm-hmm.
So it is probably a phenomenon of the same nature, or a similar nature. Munir, you wanted to say something as well?
No, yes, I agree. Yeah.
Okay, so let's see now the next subsection, spirit doubles, Saint Alfonso of Liguori and Saint Anthony of Padua. So these are facts coming from the Middle Age, from the history, which were how to say, remarkable and kept in the books or in the descriptions. Let us return to our subject. While away from the body, the spirit of a living person can show itself just as the spirit of someone who is deceased. This we have seen at the beginning. A spirit of someone who is deceased can, and with all the appearance of reality. Okay. Furthermore, for reasons that we have already explained, it can acquire momentary tangibility. So that's the next step. With tangibility means materialized. It is this phenomenon designated by the name bicorporeality. So two corpus, two bodies, materialized, the physical body at one place and the materialized spiritual body at another place, which has given rise to stories involving doubles. It est individuals whose simultaneous presence may be confirmed in two different places at the same time. Okay. There are two examples of this occurring not in popular legends, but in ecclesiastical history. Okay, so let's see. Saint Alfonso of Liguori was canonized before the time normally required for having shown himself simultaneously in two different places, which was regarded by a miracle, which is still regarded by a miracle by Catholics. While Saint Anthony of Padua was preaching on one occasion in Spain, his father, who was in Padua, Italy, was being led to his death after having been accused of murder. Saint Anthony appeared at that moment, proved that his father's innocence, and made known the identity of the true criminal, who was later put to death. It was proven at the same time Saint Anthony had not left Spain. So here we have a phenomenon which is quite expressive. He was definitively in Spain at that moment, but he could his spiritual body could materialize in Padua, so several more than 1,000 kilometers away from there, and how to say behave as if it would be present at that moment in the court or wherever they were judging his father for this crime, and giving tangible elements that were considered in the trial. Okay. When we evoked Saint Alfonso and questioned him about this incident, he provided us with the following answer. So, not satisfied only with the story coming from the ecclesiastic story, Kardec in the Spirit Society of Paris evoked the spirit of Saint Anton of Padua in order to get more information from his spirit. Okay, so let's see how has been this dialogue. Would you be willing to give us an explanation for this phenomenon? See, a very open question. Answer of the spirit of Antonio of Padua: yes. When humans have completely dematerialized themselves through their virtue and have lifted their soul towards God, they can appear in two places at the same time. See, it's interesting statement here. Dematerialize themselves, what does it mean? Acquire a higher degree of evolution, not being, how to say, so strongly bound to the matter as when the spirit is not yet so evolved. Okay, and yes.
So this is Saint Alfonso. It's not Saint Anthony.
Ah, sorry. Saint Alfonso, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, correct. Saint Alfonso of Liguori. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry for my mistake.
No problem.
So he's clearly saying that this faculty of bicorporeality will get more and more common together with the evolution of the spirits which are incarnated here on earth. Okay. Jesus had this faculty, but not only. There is also another very well-known study nowadays, which was posterior to Kardec, which is the spirit of Euripides Barçanufo, which was living in Minas Gerais, Sacramento. And his body was teaching in the school in the children, in the Kardec's college, which still today is existing. And his soul was materialized a couple of kilometers away in a farm where some person had, for instance, difficulty for having a baby or something like that, and he was there assisting. And both, of course, the students and this person from this farm were absolutely convinced he was physically there. Okay.
Charles, sorry, just to add, the students were used to Euripides Barçanufo doing that. They used to say, when he went quiet, he was staring at the blackboard, and then they would, stay silent there. They knew something was going on, and then later he recovered and carried on his lecture. And
he was telling what he made.
Yeah, and a few days later, the lady and the husband and the baby, they came to thank him for, and they said, how come he was teaching? Yeah, to deliver the baby, and how come, he was lecturing here, and his life was full of things like that. I was reading the other day. It was very common in his life.
So Liz rose her hand as well.
Yes, hello everyone. I think what's important to notice here is although anybody from elevated or non-elevated people can become mediums, it's quite apparent here that you can only have this gift or this ability once you have lifted your soul totally to God and have, raised everything like your virtues and everything. So it's not given to everyone.
This is what we understand, yes, for this first statement of the answer of Alphonse.
Yeah.
So then he continues, here is how the incarnate spirit, sensing the approach of sleep, can ask God permission to go somewhere. This spirit, or soul if you wish, then abandons the body along with a portion of his perispirit and leaves the coarse matter behind in a state that resembles death. I say resembles death because the body remains connected to the perispirit and the soul to matter by a link that cannot be defined. The perispirit then appears in the desired place. I believe that this is everything you will want to know. Okay, so he's explaining again, seeing from his eyes, from the spiritual world, how this phenomenon happens. So he's saying here that it is a portion of its perispirit who goes. Of course, the vital fluid, which is necessary for all these automatic vital functions like heart beating and breathing and so on, to maintain us alive, continue operating in the physical body, even when the spirit is at a certain distance, as we have seen. Okay. Sandra?
It's interesting here because just before it says, can ask God permission. So,
Yes.
so clear for me that you see, we need discipline. We can't do whatever come to our mind. So we ask God for permission. Yeah. To see if it's the right moment, right time. So that's very important.
Exactly. And what does it mean, this God's permission? It's because for sure, in particularly when the spirit is materializing, it needs assistance of some spirits in order the phenomenon can happen. And it will probably also need, at the place where he materializes, some medium which can release some ectoplasm, some medium for physical effect, as we have seen as well. So you see, it's a phenomenon which involves a complexity. So it cannot happen without the assistance of some good spirits, which are here. And this is somehow what he means by it needs the permission of God, or God's permission, because there need to be a full organization, on the spiritual side, from elevated spirits, who are, by the way, doing God's will, for allowing the phenomenon to happen.
Could I just add also
Yes, yes.
the usefulness of whatever is about to happen, isn't it? Because
Exactly.
it can't be just for frivolities. It has to have a good objective and be useful.
Mhm. I think it was the last time that we talked about this, because this type of faculty, I'm sure a lot of people with not always with good intentions would love to have a spirit being somewhere and perceiving and memorizing or transmitting confidential information or whatsoever. Imagine all what could happen if this would be so easy. And that's why he's saying this type of faculty will develop only with the evolution of the spirit. In other words, that it is done towards good and not towards bad things or frivolities or just curiousness. Curiosity, sorry.
Charles, just to mention, we sometimes we forget, or most of the time we forget, that in all these phenomena, we are not alone. In nature, we are not alone. We tend to think that, we are always doing things. It's very common for people who detach themselves from the body in what is called astral traveling. They think they do that on their own, but what they have also spirits around them, and depending on the purpose of that, of course, they will be assisted by similar spirits. But wherever we go, whatever we do in this physical world or in the spiritual world, we always have the assistance, because the universe, is basically run by spirits under the command of God in laws and in. So when it says, yeah, the permission of God is yes, that was allowed because I was part of a larger group who made that possible, and that was the permission.
Exactly, and you see, Eurypylus Barzanulfo, for instance, he was teaching in the college, huh? So he had not, he didn't know that there would be a problem of parturient in a given. So somehow he was just here as a tool for these good spirits in order to bring some help where the help was necessary, because when he was giving the lesson, he could probably not perceive what was happening at 10 or 20 kilometers distance. So let's see second question now. But that does not give us an explanation for the visibility and tangibility of the perispirit, does it? Okay. So you see, a spirit with a part of his perispirit can appear can dislocate at a different space. But then Kardec is asking, yes, and when it gets tangible, which was the case, by the way, of Alphonse himself. Since it is detached from the matter, and depending on how highly evolved it is, the spirit can become tangible. Okay, so detached from the matter when during the this travel, and then he says it can become tangible, probably not by himself alone, or maybe yes, who knows? Maybe the ectoplasm has by the own person himself, or the perispirit brought with him some part of ectoplasm. This we don't know yet, so we have to investigate and to see more of these cases in order to have the complete explanation. Third question is, and he's again insisting on the evolution. Okay, there must be evolved spirit in order to enable this type of phenomenon. Is the sleep of the body indispensable for the spirit to be able to appear in other places? So does he need to sleep? You see, in case of Eurypylus Barzanulfo, he did not sleep. He was in front of his students. So he was not here, clearly, but he was still standing in front of them. Answer, the soul can split itself whenever it feels attracted to a place different from where the body is. So the soul can split itself. The body does not have to be asleep, although in that case it is quite rare. However, at such time, it is not in a perfectly normal state. It is always in some degree of ecstasy. So you see, here he's exactly confirming what happened with Eurypylus Barzanulfo. He was not asleep, but he was not there either. He was, because the spirit could sleep, could split in two parts. One part which was active by helping the parturient and so on. But the other part could not be at the same time continue giving the lesson, you see. So it's exactly what the spirit Alphonse is describing here. Okay. Alors, Kardec is adding here a comment saying, the soul does not actually split itself in the literal sense of the word. So it means cut in two, split. Rather, it radiates in several directions and can thus manifest itself in many places without becoming fragmented, just as light can be reflected in several mirrors at the same time. See, very interesting, these parallels that Kardec is doing, so showing that the spirit was writing split, or the medium perceived the word split when he was transmitting the spirit's message. And Kardec was here at the end analyzing and adding this remark to explain better how it occurs. Yes, Liz?
We're also told, I think, by my teacher, Cassipian, that this is how Jesus answers, you know, and is aware of all the prayers, because his soul replicates so many times that he is able to receive that from everywhere. His soul replicates so many times.
Yes, of course, the spirit with the elevation of Jesus, they have, he talks about radiation, it radiates, must have a huge radiation and then probably be capable of being even more than 2 places at the same time.
Yeah.
Like God, the infinite is everywhere all the time. So it's really the same faculty, but at the infinite state of extension. Okay. So Kardec is continuing with Yasmin.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I just have a question then about this corporality and fragmented and as they say, as is written. So about for example, the apparition of La Vierge Marie in Lourdes in France, or for example,
Maria Virgin in Lourdes, in Fatima or wherever.
yes, or those spirits for in mediumships meetings, are when about these appearances, are they just reflection or fragment like this, or do they really come to that place?
Yeah, so here a first difference is that the spirit of Mary was not incarnated at that moment when she appeared in Lourdes or in Fatima. So it's one difference.
Okay.
So the spirit could either appear to these young boys or the young lady, Bernadette Soubirous or whoever, who had probably some mediumship for seeing spirits. Or if in the case of Fatima, it is more probable, it was a materialization because there were a lot of people seeing at the last apparition, could see or a light or whatever, they could perceive something. So there was a physical effect on top of it in that occurrence. So both can happen. But again, Yasmin, we have seen several times now that the fact that the spirit is incarnated or not somehow does not change the fact that its spirit can appear somewhere, and when it is incarnated, it can be somewhere different, at a different place than where the body is.
Okay, thank you.
Alors, if someone were deep in sleep, Kardec continuing with one additional question, and this is amazing in Kardec. When you see, it's asking and asking and asking, and until he's really he really got the maximum out of the communicating spirits when they were there. So
All
if
the spirits
someone,
are telling him off, isn't it, Charles? I already told you that.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. If someone were deep in sleep while the spirit was appearing somewhere else, what would happen if she or he would, or he or she were suddenly awakened? It's a good question. Good question. That would not happen because if someone intended to awaken the person, his or her spirit would return to the body in anticipation, given that the spirit would have read the thought. See, one additional interesting element here. So it's not just caught by surprise and then coming at the speed of thought, higher than the speed of light back to the body. It is even being back before it happens, okay? Because in the spiritual world, somebody came up in order to wake up the person. This was perceived before the person reached the room in order to awake the person, okay? And Kardec is finishing, an identical explanation has been given to us many times by spirits of both deceased and living individuals. Saint Alfonso has explained the double presence of phenomenon, but has offered no theory concerning visibility and tangibility. So Kardec is recognizing, okay, he gave us good elements, but still missing how does it get visible and tangible. As we commented already, someone medium with ectoplasm somewhere, or maybe ectoplasm from the own person itself, then enabling the tangibility of the spirit where he wants to appear, where he is appearing. Yes, Liz?
Could it also, in this question, what is shouting to me is that exactly what you and Muni have said about these things doesn't happen like they don't do it by themselves on their own. Like it may also have it has other people supporting, more elevated spirits supporting this sort of phenomena. I think these just say as well that you have some support, some assistance on that moment, so you can come back safely, and you are kind of aware of more or less of your surroundings, where your body is. I think it just, for me, it shouts for me that you are not on your own, and then you are assisted in that moment as well for that reason too.
Exactly. This I think we can state for sure, that such phenomenon does not appear without quite intense and extensive and complex assistance of spiritual entities in the spiritual world, for sure. Liz?
I think, yeah, because all this assistance is needed, there is the question of free will, and it's the free will of those who are assisting. So I think that is one of the main reasons why permission should be asked of God in the first place, because otherwise you're breaking the free will of all the assistance that you would require without asking first.
Yes, but well, from the spirit's point of view, it's clear the free will is here. Otherwise, they would not be here. Okay, because if they are not willing to collaborate to something, they just don't come. And in the case of Felipe Barzanulfo, it was somehow his mission to help, and he did it in the normal state. So he was constantly through his life, after he knew the Spiritism, available for helping wherever he could help. So it was also his will in order to help, even going through this bicorporeality phenomenon to bring the help. So in all these cases, the free will is fulfilled.
I wasn't talking about the actual people that were bilocating or what was it, in two places at once. I was talking about the other mediums, that were involved, or other assistants to help provide that, that task, so that they can bilocate in the first place. That they are forewarned, maybe, that their ectoplasm or whatever is going to be used at that time.
Yes, I think the question can be risen as well. For instance, in the previous case, when you have seen the spirit throwing stones somewhere, it was also said that he was using fluids from a person, an incarnated person, without this person being aware that he was using his fluids. Okay, but here again, the person was maybe not aware in his waking state, but was probably aware, or she was informed before up front during his sleep, when her spirit was in the spiritual world. Do you agree that we use your fluids, even you not being aware, in order to produce this and that phenomenon? And for sure, the person was agreeing before the phenomenon happened. So it can be explained.
Yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Munir?
Yes, I was going to say that, we don't know what happened before, what had been programmed, but we also know that, when we have what we call gifts, we have, some kind of work that needs to be done. And perhaps at that moment we chose not to pay attention to that, but the fluid that we have, for instance, the ectoplasm is there, it is to be used, but we are not doing our part. But it's going to be used in certain situations, of course, with permission always of higher spirits. Although this permission sometimes not clear, because we say, well, the spirit doing that, as Charles said, casting stone, is not an evolved spirit. Yes, but he wouldn't be doing that if he wasn't, for the permission that has been granted from higher above. And also, for instance, in the case of Euripides Barçanufo, he wasn't trying to go anywhere or, to induce the phenomenon. He was there doing something else, but he was engaged in the work of charity, of helping others. It's like being, a doctor in the ER, in the emergency. Whatever happens there, they won't come and ask your permission. Oh, can we have your permission to give assistance to this person? You were there for that. So whenever it's necessary, any emergency, you will be called and you go immediately. And that's what happened to him. He was there. There was a need, for some reason, it was him, the one, who was he the one who could help in that situation? Off he went, and then did the job and came back and but there is a team behind that. Especially, we choose to engage and said, yes, he was engaged in very charitable work. So naturally, he was with the group that was doing the same thing from the spirit side. But sometimes if I have, tremendous mediumship in terms of intensity of it, but I'm not concerned with using it for the good of others or for help, for charity or so on, someone might use my faculty, just like someone can induce us to do something for them because we are very skilled. Oh, you could go there and convince that people are doing this and that, and we don't judge. Oh, that is wrong. I won't use my ability to convince people, to convince them to do, to commit a crime. But if we are not aware of that, if we go, okay, I'll do that, and then you're convincing someone to commit a crime, because you have this power of convincing people, but you're not paying too much attention to exactly why, what's the reason for using your skills. And I think with our faculties, spiritual faculties, it's the same thing. That's why it's important, if we have strong signs of mediumship, to engage in charitable work, to try to use the faculty for good purpose. Otherwise, the faculty will be there. It will be used somehow. Someone will find a way to use it, hopefully for the good.
Charles and Munir, it's Christine again.
Yes.
I'm not sure if I've relayed this. I think I might have, but just to remind people, and I know I've said it in the spiritual Zoom meeting that I go to. I was walking out of my house down the street, in a street that one of my relations lived in that I didn't know years ago, or hundreds of years ago. And I was going for a walk, and all of a sudden I was looking at the footpath, but through the eyes of a different person. But I knew that I was still there, but I was only partially there. But I also felt I was a man, and I was dressed in 1940s type dress wear. I was wearing long pants, and it was brown, and it was a brown jacket, and a brown hat. Can't remember the color of the shirt, but that happened to me, and I was told by someone that was called overshadowing. Would that be something that, like, I'm hearing people talk about now?
I would say here there can be also another dimension, what we call reminiscence, remembering somehow of past lives. which can be superposing to how to say, to the phenomenon itself.
Thank you.
Because how to say, these reminiscences of past life really are quite accurate when they come back to the conscience. When you see the phenomenon, they make a really very detailed description of what they saw. And how to say, it is sometimes even not very easy to analyze. You see the example of Divaldo Pereira Franco. He's telling, or in his biography, we can see that when he was young, he was working in a public entity for attending people coming to ask for information or documents or whatever. And the story says that sometimes he went to the place where he saw a person coming in order to attend this person and give some explanation. And his boss started to be concerned because he was standing speaking with someone, but the boss could not see with whom he was speaking. So for Divaldo, he was seeing a spirit which was appearing to him at that place. And he had even difficulty to make the difference between the spirit and a physical person like us. And then in order to avoid having problems with his boss, he had another working colleague which was in the same place. And they agreed together that when Divaldo was seeing someone, he was first consulting this other person. Is it really someone physical here? And when she said yes, then he stand up and attended the person. But when he was only an apparition, he was not going in order to avoid the problems, you see. So this is showing, illustrating the difficulty we have sometimes in making the difference between a very strong, real, either dream or reminiscence or something that we can, which is coming in our mind, with the reality. So that's why it's always interesting and important, like in the case of Divaldo, having a second person in order to have a cross-check. And probably this type of things happens also in these big corporeality phenomena for sure. Okay, I think.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Time to finish?
Yes, we are close from the end. So thanking again the good spirits who were with us for this quite interesting topics that we saw today, which can happen in our lives and will probably happen more and more in the future. So good that we know a little bit more about these laws of nature, particularly involving the spiritual world, and that this may help us in our day-to-day life and behavior and also in our effort to become every day a little bit better than the day before. Thanks a lot to all of you for your time, for your attention. All the best, and see you soon. Thanks a lot.
See you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye.
you, Josh. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Beautiful.